So normally what we are doing it, either you talk about in ECC or you talk about in S4. Finally, we are creating the vendor or customer. So in ECC, we are directly creating the vendor or customer without creating the business partner. Business partner concept has been introduced only in S4HANA. In S4HANA, first we need to create the business partner and then we need to extend the business partner to either vendor or customer. So far, we are doing the accounts payable. So we are checking here for vendor master data. So when we do the account receivable, we'll also check how to extend to the customer, one business partner, how to extend to the customer also. Now, first we'll discuss about vendor. So before we create vendor, we have created something called vendor account group. See, vendor account group. So first we'll understand what is vendor account group. So in an organization, there will be different types of vendor will be there. Okay, vendors or suppliers, you can classify in the organization. There are different types of vendor or supplier would be there. They may be vendors which are related to location wise. Let's say, for example, you have some domestic vendor and you have some foreign vendors, and also based on the business wise also, some vendor will provide you services, some vendor will provide the organization raw material, some vendor will provide the organization packaging material. So likewise, whatever organization need, so there are different vendors who are providing different services or material. You can differentiate this vendor either based on location or based on the nature of business, what your organization does with the vendor. So this vendor account group, it will classify all those vendors. Let's say, for example, as I discussed, let's say we have vendor, domestic vendor, you have foreign vendor. Then some vendor provide you services. Then you can call it as a service vendor. Then some vendor provide you raw material. Then some vendor may provide you packaging material. So just I'm giving you few examples. So this vendor, with the help of vendor account group, you can classify this vendor. So at any given point of time, you want to see, okay, how much business, how much transaction is done with the, how much transaction is done by your business with this domestic vendor. You can get reports for this. Same way for all different foreign vendors, service vendor, raw material, packaging material. So for each type of material, you have to create one account group, vendor account group. Let's say, for example, vendor account group for domestic vendor. Then foreign, then you have service vendor. Likewise, you have to create the different account group. Why do we need to create different account group? Can you tell me? What happens if we don't create if we create the same account group, what happens?
We won't be able to find the separate uh, profit or a status of the.
Yeah, we'll not be able to know. How much we need to pay to the foreign vendor, how much we need to pay to the domestic vendor, right? Correct? Service vendor, raw material. So we'll not be able to know. So we have concept of vendor account group. So for each vendor account group, we need to create the reconciliation account. Okay, this is vendor account group. So let's say you will be creating one sundry creditor domestic. Then you will create one sundry creditor foreign. So this reconciliation account, it's group of it's grouping the vendors under each account group. Let's say for this domestic vendor account group, you have some 1,000 vendors. Okay. So you are assigning one reconciliation account to total 1,000 vendor. So whatever the transaction are getting posted in the domestic vendor for all 1,000 vendors. So those transactions will also get posted in the domestic reconciliation account also because of the link between reconciliation and vendors. Okay. So this finally, this GL accounts, it will be reflect in the balance sheet on the credit side. I mean, on the liability side, this GL account will get reflect. So when we open the balance sheet, we have two sides, liability and asset. This centric creditor is a part of liability. So if you create different vendor account groups, then we'll have to create separate reconciliation account also, so that each reconciliation account will reflect in the liability side of the balance sheet, so that you will get to know you have to pay to the domestic supplier this much of amount. You have to pay to the foreign supplier this much of amount. Likewise, because you have to do the segregation. Hope you understand what is vendor account group. It classifies the different types of vendor or supplier. So for each type of vendor or supplier, we have to create a separate group. So if somebody asks you what is the business reason to create the different types of vendor account group. So basically, when you go to the client place, when you go to the implementation project, what happens? What is the logic? How many vendor account groups shall we create? So totally depend upon MM team. So we have material management team, right? Material management team, MM team. So what they will do, MM team, if you talk about the MM module, there are different types of material will be there. Okay, we call it as a material type in MM module. Material type of material. Let's say, for example, raw material, uh, packaging material, finished goods. So likewise, whatever the material they are purchasing from the vendor, so they will have to segregate. They will have to see the type of transaction they are posting for each type of material. So for that purpose, we have to suggest the client for raw material vendor, create one separate vendor account group. For packaging material, create another account group. And for finished goods, create another account group. Just I am giving you few example, but at least in organization, when you go to the real-time project, they may have some 10 to 12 or 15 material type. So for each material type, as a finance consultant, you should suggest them to create one separate account group. So you need to classify those vendor based on the account group. As and when you open your books of account, you will get to know, okay, from the supplier who provide the raw material to the business, you have done this much of transaction, and this will get posted in the reconciliation account separate. So this is the logic based on the material type. So you have to create at least one vendor account group, and also based on the location of the vendors. Example, if vendors are located outside country, then you have to create separate account group for that vendor as well. Okay, you got my point?
So,
Everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. So basically, this is very, very important topic. So when you are facing interview, right? So, your interviewer may ask you, what was your discussion with the client? I mean, how do you decide? How did you decide in your project to create how many vendor account group? Then you should say that we had a discussion with the client that they were using this many material type, and they want to see the separate transaction for each type of material. Say for example, raw material, packaging material, finished goods, and there were some vendors which were located outside the country. So for each of them, we have asked the business to use the separate account group so that they can use the separate reconciliation account also. That's why vendor account group is created. Okay. So vendor account group, it classifies the vendor based on the location or and also based on the nature of the business. So service vendor means employees. It may be employees or any vendor which is providing services to the organization. Maintenance services would also be there, correct? Repairs and maintenance. So for that, they will give contract to the vendors. Even employee also vendor to the organization. Okay. Any doubt?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So if I compare this vendor account group, what we have defined in the we also define the GL account group, right? You remember we also define the GL account group. So GL account group and vendor account group, it has got the similar functionality. If you look at here, if you talk about the GL account group, it classifies the different GL account, right? Like asset, liability, income, expenses. So GL account group also, it does the classification, and also vendor account group also, it does the classification of vendors. So there is similarity. And also one more thing, very important thing for the vendor account group also. So vendor account group controls field status of vendor master data for all the three segments. So we'll discuss what are the segments and all. So first thing, if you remember, when you hear about the GL account group also, it controls the field status of GL master data of a company code segment. Do you remember this point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So GL account has two segments. Out of two segment, GL master data control the fields of company code segment, whereas vendor account group control the field status of the vendor master data for all the three segment. So vendor master data has three segment: general data segment, company code segment, and purchasing data segment. So what do you mean by general data segment? See, I will open the SAP, then you will get to know that. So when we create the vendor master data, so we have to create with three segments: general data segment, company code segment, and purchasing data segment. So when we talk about the general data segment, what information are we giving in the general data segment? So any information which is related to vendor, such as name of the vendor, address of the vendor, bank account of the vendors, are given in the general data segment. Okay. What information we give in the general data segment? Any information which is related to vendor will be giving, like name of the vendor, address of the vendor, and bank account of the vendor. These are all some of the example we have shown you. So this information will add in the general data segment. Okay. Any question so far?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
Great. So what is company code segment? Company code segment is related to finance department. Means any information, any data which is relevant for finance department, we are giving in the company code segment, such as reconciliation account, house bank, payment terms. So we'll see. I'm just introducing this particular topic to you. We'll see in detail. Okay, as we progress in the course. Okay, as we move on, we'll discuss. So remember, company general data segment, we give the data or in we any data or information, any data which is related to vendor, we are defining in the general data segment. And any data which is related to the finance department, we are giving in the company code segment. And what is purchasing data segment? Purchasing data segment, this is related to department. This is related to module. Okay, what we are defining? Any data which is related to module will be given in the purchasing data segment. We'll see this. This part we'll see when we do the FIMM integration. At this point of time, I will just park this topic. Okay. So now let's try to understand these two segments, general data segment and company code data segment. Okay. So you know about general data segment means any information or data which is related to vendor, we are defining in the general data segment. Say for example, I will first open the SAP ECC because we have defined both places, right? This window. So let's say, for example, what is the T code to define the vendor account group OBD3? We have seen also already. What is our account group? T820. So if you look at here, while defining the account group, see this section, if you look at here, general data segment, company code data segment, and purchasing data segment. So this is under field status, means this account group, it controls the field status of general data segment, company code segment, and purchasing data segment. And you can go to the edit field status. We'll see that. We'll see that later on, but we'll try to understand. I mean, while defining the vendor, how many screens are belong to the general data segment and how many screens are related to company code segment. At this point of time, we are creating the vendor using this two segment only, general data segment and company code data segment. Because when we do the FIMM integration, then we'll add the purchasing data segment also to the vendor. Okay. I will just open the FK01. It's a T code to create the vendor master. So our company code is TA20. TA20. Okay, just give the company here. So if you look at here, it's asking for what? Name of the vendor, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any information which is relevant to vendor, uh, what what is this segment called? So this is
General data.
general data segment, general data segment. This is the general data for the vendor. So any information, like let's say any information I am giving, it's a general data segment. You have to give the address of the vendor. Okay. At this point of time, I'm just giving the country. Okay. I will press enter. So this is also, if you look at here, this is also general data segment up to here. Press enter. This is also, it's asking for create vendor payment transaction, means vendor bank account. So up to here, we find it's a general data segment. We'll see, we'll revisit these pages and we'll see that when we discuss the vendor master data topic, we'll revisit here and we'll see that again. So now the purpose here is I want to show you what are general data segment and what is company code segment pages. Now press enter. So now if you look at here, create vendor accounting information. So when I say accounting information, so as I said, as I have written here, any data which is relevant to finance department means accounting information is related to finance department, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Yes, sir.
from here, this is related to company code segment. This is related to company code segment. So any data which is specific to this particular company code, you will find in this segment. Say for example, a reconciliation account. We have created this reconciliation account in the company code TA20, right? So this will reflect here. Sort key. So this is company code relevant information. So this cash management group, we don't require it. Okay. I will show you how to do that, how to hide this. So I will just at this of time, I will assign any value. I will go ahead. So enter. This is also payment terms. So we'll discuss what is payment term, what is this, everything we'll discuss, payment method and all. So these are all information related to particular company code. Okay. This is the company code. Enter, enter and save. So if you notice here, we have created this vendor master. How many segments? Out of three segments, how many segments we have added here?
So two.
Great. Who said two? Right
What
answer.
was
Yeah, right answer, Vadu. So everybody agree with Vadu?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. So now this code. So these two vendor codes, okay, 4 lakh, 4 1 all zeros 100, 4 1 all zeros 101. So this vendor code is called, can only be posted in FI. Okay. Since we have created vendor master with two segments, general data segment and company code segment. This vendor can only be posted in finance, in FI. You cannot use this vendor to post the related transactions. Okay, this vendor can only be used to post the FI related transaction. The reason is we have not added the purchasing data segment. Once we add the purchasing data segment to this vendor master, okay, then we can use this vendor for purchasing related postings also. When we do the FIMM integration, right, we'll add the purchasing data segment also, so that we can use this vendor for material postings also. At this point of time, we can use this vendor only for the FI postings, FI related posting. It cannot be used for the material postings. Do you understand what I am trying to say?
Yeah, sir.
So since we have created this vendor only with the two segment, company general data segment and company code segment. So we can only post this vendor only in finance. We cannot use this vendor for the material postings. When we can use this vendor for the material posting, when we add the purchasing data segment. Why we are not adding the purchasing data segment means, to add the purchasing data segment, we require some configuration from the side, like purchase organization. Okay, purchase organization we require. So that configuration, it will be done from the side. Let's say, for example, I want to show you. To create the vendor with all the three segments, T code is XK01. See, XK01. So if you look at here, company code, account group, and purchasing organization. So if you add the purchasing organization here and press enter by giving the vendor code here, then you will be able to add the purchasing data segment also. At this point of time, we don't want to add the purchasing data segment because we don't have the configuration settings related to module. So when we learn the FIMM integration, we'll define the purchasing organization and then we'll add the purchasing data segment also. Okay. Now, so any vendor, this vendors, whatever we have created with two segment is called decentralized vendor. Decentralized vendor means this vendor can only be posted in FI module. Okay. Then we have something called centralized vendor. So in this case, we will create the vendor with two segments, such as general data segment and company code data segment. Whereas centralized vendor means this vendor can be posted in FI and also in both. In this case, we will create the vendor with three segments. Such as general data segment, company code segment, and purchasing data segment. Hope you understand what is the difference between decentralized vendor and centralized vendor.
Yes, sir.
Any question?
No, sir.
Yeah, this is very important for us, for you to understand. Okay, this all these three segment. Okay, now general data segment is at the is at client level. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? Can you guess?
So when are you
General data can be used for all company codes.
Sorry, sorry. Can you repeat again?
One general data segment, if we create, we can be used for other company codes as well.
Yeah, right answer. Let's say, for example, whatever the vendor we have created, right? Say, for example, what is this? FP60, I will show you. So this whatever you doing here, okay, this vendor can be used by multiple company code because vendor is also at the client level. So when we create the vendor also is also at the client level, means one vendor can be used by multiple company codes. The reason is, let's say you have three company codes, example. So same vendor, it's providing raw material to all the three company codes, correct? It can it is possible, right? In a business, one
Yes,
vendor is can be yeah, one vendor can be supplying the raw material to all your three company codes. So for each company code, you no need to create separate code for this vendor. Vendor code would be the same for all the three company code, but company code data and purchasing data would be different. You are getting my point.
yes, sir.
So this vendor code will be the same for all the three company code, but your company code data segment and purchasing data segment may be different based on the uh, based on the department policy. But this vendor code will be the same. Say for example, this vendor code is there, right? I want to show you how this vendor can be used by multiple company codes. Say for example, I will go to FS00. I will show you how you can extend this vendor to the another company code. Let's say FP60 I am showing you, wherein TA20 company is there. Say for example, sorry, TA40 company code. TA40 is not created here, right? Other company codes are there. We'll see. Let's say we'll talk about this 1009 company code. Go to FS00. So in 1009, see, is there any center is created or no? No need, no problem. What we can do is, I will show you in some other company code. Let's say, how many minutes are left? 1 minute. I am stopping.